Hi, I'm Una Chaplin, and I'm the host of a new podcast called Hollywood Exiles. It tells the story of how my grandfather, Charlie Chaplin, and many others were caught up in a campaign to root out communism in Hollywood. Hollywood Exiles, from CBC Podcasts and the BBC World Service. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, I'm James Reynolds. Welcome to The Documentary from the BBC World Service. In BBC OS Conversations, we bring people together to share their experiences. In this week's edition, Conversations on Leaving Gaza. Since the war began, we've tried where possible to take a step back, to hear from civilians in both Israel and Gaza. This time, doctors who've been working in Gaza share their experiences of operating during bombing raids. We catch up with a mother and her two daughters who fled the war.
Everything we're familiar with, everything that our memories is related to, it is now gone. I cannot recognize my own city, the city I have spent my whole life with.
You may have seen the satellite images published by BBC Verify this week that showed the extent of destruction in Gaza. The detailed pictures reveal that more than half of all buildings have been damaged or destroyed. Many residential areas are in ruins. There's simply nothing to go back to. Obtaining accurate figures, though, for the number of people killed or injured since the war began in October is much more difficult. Israel says it strives to avoid civilian casualties, including, where possible, issuing evacuation orders. But according to the territory's Hamas-run health ministry, more than 26,000 people have been killed in Gaza, including more than 11,500 under 18s. Thousands more have been injured. And in our first conversation, we hear from doctors who've been working in a hospital in Gaza, helping to save lives. They were part of a delegation organised by Med Global, an international humanitarian non-governmental organisation. As you'll appreciate, making contact with people whilst they're inside the territory is really hard. It's often incredibly difficult to get a phone line. So I spoke to the doctors a few days ago after they'd returned to Chicago in the States. Let me introduce you then to Dr. John Kaler, a paediatrician or children's doctor, Dr. Chandra Hassan, and Dr. Zahir Salul, a critical care specialist.
Where you have tents everywhere, shortage of food and water and fuel and medical supplies, where the hospitals are struggling with the influx of large number of injured people. Every few hours you have mass casualty event where innocent people, especially children, die unnecessarily. I mean, all of this makes this situation quite different than previous disasters, quite painful.
Zahir and I have been in several conflict zones together, but this was an order of magnitude worse than I expected. And it was particularly because the crowding and degradation that these families have gone through. You're talking about little kids under 1 year of age and their families. This is winter, and these families are crowded in cold, wet, congested, degrading conditions. And as we were leaving and Khan Yunis was being evacuated, the road was just simply lined cheek to jowl with desperation. I've worked in camps before. I was in Haiti after the earthquake, and this is just a dystopian nightmare for me.
It's been the most extensive range of trauma injuries I've witnessed anywhere. I was trained in Bronx, and Philadelphia and the United States is unfortunately known for many firearm injuries. And we have been to Ukraine and Syria. But the extent of injuries and age group that's involved as casualties from young children, 3 years onwards, all the way to 80s and 90s. There is no discrimination of the age, sex, or patient's disability. It's a multiple organ system with multiple severe injuries. So a lot of them don't make it.
I wonder, Dr. Kaler, our paediatrician, tell me what it was like working with local colleagues, with doctors from Gaza itself.
They were fantastic physicians with the most limited of resources. They're all wonderful humanitarians who want to help. Most of them are unpaid, and yet they will struggle with you shoulder to shoulder to see this patient burden.
And Dr. Salul, did you have all the supplies you needed? And if you found you were running out of something, how easy was it to get that into Gaza?
We were able to bring several luggages of supplies inside Gaza. Of course, it's not enough. I mean, what's happening in Gaza is a shortage of simple things that we take for granted, like insulin for patients who have diabetes. There's no insulin. Plates and screws for patients who have fractures. There's no plates and screws. I remember one patient, a young guy with a fracture in the lower jaw, and he was intubated because of swelling of the upper airways. He needed a simple surgery to fix the fracture in his lower jaw, and they were not able to find it. So he stayed on the ventilator for a long time waiting for to be evacuated. So this shortage of medical supplies, surgical supplies, medications is huge.
Type 1 diabetes needs insulin. It's estimated to be 950 children with type 1 diabetes. If these children don't get insulin, there's absolutely no question they will die. They won't be considered war deaths, but in fact, they will be.
Even in the short time you were there, was there a single day in which when you began the day and the work piled up, you thought, how am I going to get through this?
There was one particular day where the fighting was quite intensive. In the morning when we were going to the clinic, it took us 3 hours instead of 30 minutes. That is the usual case because the roads were clogged with people fleeing Khan Yunis area to what they perceive as safer area in Rafah. People collected what they had on their cars, on their carriages that pulled by donkeys, on their back, clogged the streets from Khan Yunis to Rafah. And I haven't seen anything like this in my life. And I thought, these are people who were displaced multiple times before, and now they are squeezed into a much smaller area. I felt danger. I felt, sad for the people, the children, the women, the elderly, and I didn't know what to do at that situation.
Zahir said something very, very important when we were there. He took a picture of this road of desperation with people fleeing, racks stacked 10 feet in the air, families jammed 15 to a car. And he showed it to me and he said, you know what, John? He said, this picture's in color. If I took this picture and published it in black and white, you couldn't tell this wasn't the Nakba of 1948. And that was exactly correct. The road was completely jammed with desperation. There may have been a time I felt, how can I go through this? But I caught myself very quickly when I put the word I in there. I was going to go home in a few weeks. These poor folks were going to be trapped there. It was desperation of the first order.
Where did you all sleep when you were in Gaza?
I mean, the first night we arrived into Gaza, we had a guest house in an area that is considered safe. We woke up 1 hour after we went to bed. It was a long trip, took us like 16 hours from Cairo to get into Gaza. And the house was shaking, and there was a loud explosion nearby. We rushed downstairs and trying to figure out what to do next. Then we decided to go back to bed. And then in the next few nights, war was normalized in our minds. So we hear explosions, but we just slept over it like everyone else.
The fight sometimes starts like the bombing, sometimes as early as 3 in the morning, and it continues to the midnight next day. It's amazing, within a day or two, you adapt to that noise. Blast waves hit the operating room. You can see that your Mayo table with all the instruments that rattle, doors that slam, you can see the wall plaster falls off. So you learn to live with that, and you sleep out of exhaustion, I've been in surgery for more than 30 years, and I never thought I could fall asleep fully scrubbed in, sterile, in the middle of a case. As soon as you fall asleep within like 30 seconds, you just get a jerk and you just wake up, right? That happened to me in the middle of a surgery. All of this really escalated to the point on Tuesday, January 16th night. That was within 2 blocks. We can smell the explosives, all the smoke coming into the hospital itself. That night was the most intensive bombing. My colleagues, they had to move all these mattresses to protect the windows from getting blasted off. The bombing was continuing all night. I thought I didn't sleep at all, and then they told me I was snoring for a couple of hours. So that's the kind of exhaustion you go through. People live through this, children, women, newborn, elderly, a lot of disabled, and this is not normal.
When it came time to go, what was it like saying goodbye to local colleagues who were not able to leave Gaza?
I felt relief because I missed my family, I missed my work in Chicago and the comfort of my house and clinic. But at the same time, I felt sad because we are leaving the people of Gaza. The mere fact, and we were told that by many colleagues in the hospitals and the clinics, that we made the effort and stayed in Gaza for a couple of weeks, made them feel safer, even if maybe my clinical contribution was not as significant as they are doing. We're there to learn from them. I mean, these are amazing people. These are the unsung heroes that no one is talking about them. I think the media should highlight that. You know, all of these emotions goes in your mind when you're leaving. But at the same time, I mean, there's a sense of relief that I'm leaving a war zone and I want to see my family.
Let me add on top of that, too, because one of the things was that I was actually invigorated when I was leaving for two reasons. One is I now realized what I needed to bear testimony to. It's one thing knowing it intellectually, it's one thing reading about it, but to actually sit there and feel the concentration of people being pushed into a desperation, and yet civil society holds. So on one hand, I was able to understand that I could now really bear witness in this. And on the second, it drove another course in my life, which is that this is now a cause for which I will dedicate the rest of my life to. I'm an old man and won't be around to see the end of it, but I can certainly do everything I can from now until that to advocate for the Palestinian people, to support our organization and its work. So I was both very, very moved and very invigorated by the move.
When you do return for your next stint of work, what will you pack?
A lot of hope. I'm going to pack a big smile. I have a habit when I see a child in war zone to ask them, what are you going to be in the future? And in 90% of the time, they say a doctor. You know, education in Gaza is, I think 98% of the people are educated. Children have high aspiration to be a doctor or engineer or a teacher. One child, though, he smiled and he said, what future? So I'm going to pack maybe a future for the children of Gaza, because this is, I think, what we owe it to the people of Gaza. Now that we know what they are going through, we need to advocate on their behalf to make sure that their stories are reached to the people who can make a difference in their life.
Basic necessities can be met relatively quickly. There's plenty of tents in the world. There's plenty of food in the world. What I would pack in my suitcase, I agree with Zahir, I would pack all the hope I can bring. We've set up a nutrition center. We've set up a primary healthcare center. So I'll bring my work, bring whatever I can to help, and plan to stay on the ground.
Dr. John Kaler, Dr. Chandra Hassan and Dr. Zahir Salul from the NGO Med Global, now back in the US. You may have heard them mention Al-Nakba, Arabic for catastrophe. That's when hundreds of thousands of Palestinians fled or were forced from their homes during the Arab-Israeli War of 1948. A reminder, perhaps, of the very long history of unresolved tensions and conflicts in the region. I'm James Reynolds. You're listening to BBC OS Conversations on Leaving Gaza from the BBC World Service.
For just as long as Hollywood has been Tinseltown, there have been suspicions about what lurks behind the glitz and glamour. And for a while, those suspicions grew into something much bigger and much darker.
Are you a member of the Communist Party? Or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
I'm Una Chaplin, and from CBC Podcasts and the BBC World Service, this is Hollywood Exiles. It's about a battle for the political soul of America, and the battlefield was Hollywood. Search for Hollywood Exiles wherever you get your podcasts.
I mentioned earlier those satellite images showing how the bombardment of southern and central Gaza has intensified since the beginning of December. Israel has repeatedly told Palestinians in Gaza to move south for their own safety. And the pictures also reveal new impromptu cities of tents on the territory's southern border with Egypt to house some of the 1.7 million people. That's about 80% of Gaza's entire population who've been displaced. We know from aid agencies and BBC teams on the ground that these families are facing shortages of water, food, medicine, the basic stuff of life. Some, though, have managed to get out of Gaza, but in doing so, they've had to make the agonizing decision to leave their wider family behind. 35-year-old Layan and her two daughters, 12-year-old Sama and Ilya, who's just 8, had to take the long and the dangerous journey from Gaza City to Khan Yunis in the south. They since managed to cross the border into Egypt, where they are now living safely in Cairo.
I had a perfect life. Now I'm back to zero. I have to start all over again. I had to leave my mother, my sisters, my father, my grandmother. And it was very, very hard to leave the family. I evacuated to their house. When I left my house, I took refuge with a family that related to me. We had life together. We shared our meals. We shared our laughs. We shared our talks. We shared our screams in the dark nights. Basically, everyone I love, everyone I had, everyone who was related to me was back there in Gaza, and I was forced to leave them all behind with a broken heart.
Sama and Ilya, your mum just said you all had to leave members of your family behind. What's that like for you both?
When we left, we really missed them and we were worried about them like the entire time.
Do you get to speak to them now?
No, because most of the time they don't have connection.
Ilya, I know you're 8 and you're listening, and I want to make sure you get to speak as well. Do you miss your grandparents?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you like doing with them when life is normal?
We used to go out to the beach and go swim together.
Wow. Are you good at swimming?
No.
I bet you must be good. And do you think maybe one day you will get to do that again with your grandparents?
Yes.
Yeah. Layan, listening to your daughters there, it sounds like there were some amazingly fun days with your family.
Yes, we had a good life back
Yeah.
there. We had everything we needed, actually. Right now, I don't see anything of that returning, because the thing when you're living in a war, it is not only the tangible things that you miss and you lose. It's not only that I lost my house and I lost friends, I lost dear friends. What the occupation and the Israeli army is doing now is killing our attachment to all familiar things that we had. Killing the streets, it is killing the trees, it is killing the beach, it is killing the markets, the stores, like everything we're familiar with, everything that our memories is related to, it is now gone. I can see some of the pictures over the TV that is coming out from Gaza. I cannot recognize my own city, the city I have spent my whole life with. My grandmother's house, it is a really old house that was built back in the 80s. It is built by rocks that is ancient. They destroyed the garden that surrounds the house. It has very old trees that's hundreds of years old. They removed the bricks on the garden. They have removed the balcony. These places to me, it may mean nothing to anyone else, but it means my childhood, my beautiful memories. It is now all gone.
You're now in exile, in greater safety, of course, but still away from your home. Layan, when you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing you think about?
Every time in the morning when I wake up, I remember that I'm here in Cairo. I'm safe and sound. My daughters are still safe and sound. I thank God for that. And then I think, how did my house wake up today? How did my family wake up today? I grab my phone and go over the news. If we have connection to Gaza, I try to call my family there. And if they don't have connection, I just try to go over the news and see if anything, there is any news related to a bombing that happened to the area where they are.
On the times in which you do have a phone connection, what do you talk about?
We talk about, how do you feel? Do you have food? Do you have water? How did you manage to charge your phone today? Are you safe? Are you hungry? Are you cold?
What do they ask you?
They ask me how I am, how the girls are. Are we eating well? Are we staying in a good place? They try to talk to the girls, so they find in their voices a relief. Then I try to talk about good things to them to get out of the atmosphere they're living in. Try to talk to them about things they see here, about what people coming out of Gaza are saying, and try to make them feel better in my call. When I talk to my grandma, she's old and she's sick. I managed to hear her voice yesterday for less than a minute, and she told me that she's getting worse because she can't have her medications. There is no medicines in Gaza right now, and that she drinks salty water. They don't have access to fresh water, and even the salty water they get is in a very, very difficult process. It is a bad feeling when you talk to them because the things they are going through reaches you, and because I was with them, I know how exactly they feel, and I feel them, I hear them, I see them. And the fact that I'm now safe and I can find food, I can find tap water, I can shower, and they can do all that, it's paining me. I know I can do nothing about this, but the survivor guilt that I'm out, they're still in. I can make a life, they can't. They're struggling to find food, they're struggling to find water, and I'm just a few kilometers away. This feeling is killing me.
And I know that's very common among people who have survived or escaped wars to feel guilt. And of course, maybe your family feels that they are happy that you are safe. But that guilt,
yes, of course.
That guilt that you have, even if they tell you not to feel guilty, that they are happy to hear your daughter's safe, is that guilt something that's really hard for you?
When I hear their voices happy when they talk to us and talk to girls, and when my mom is feels good about one of her daughters is being safe, she thinks that at least one of them can survive now. At least if we all die, one of us can stay alive. So me feeling that she has that feeling is very hard.
But she's happy you're safe.
Of course, she's happy we're safe. She's very happy we're safe, but I'm not happy.
While I've got you on the line, Ilya and Sama, I know that you miss your family and that you must feel very, very sad about that. And you're now...
They also miss the school and
the school.
And their home, their toys. Yes, their friends there.
Ilya, do you miss your friends?
Yes.
What are their names?
Lilia, because her house got bombed, and my rest of my friends are here.
Okay. And do you remember when you used to play at home? What were your favorite games to play?
Barbie.
Barbie. Wow. Do you have a Barbie doll?
Yes.
Wow. Is she one of your favorite things in the world?
Yes.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you've got some friends in Egypt, in Cairo, you can play with?
Yes.
Oh, that's nice. And Sama, I know you're a bit older, and at the age of 12, you really do understand what's happening. Are you having an okay time in Cairo, Sama?
Yes, because we're safe, and like most of my friends are safe.
And when you see your friends, what kind of things do you talk about, Sama?
We talk about like who of our friends, like they're still in Gaza, and whose house got bombed and stuff like that.
And do you ever have any days in Egypt where you feel safe and you can enjoy life with your friends?
Yeah, because but sometimes when you hear the airplanes, I think it's the Israeli warplanes because I got so used to it. And I get scared.
You get scared, yeah?
Me too. When I hear a loud noise or an airplane moving, always comes first to my mind that it's a war plan and that I have to take shelter at the moment. I think our bodies is still in the state of defense or the state of survival instinct.
Layan and her daughters, Sama and Ilya. And it was great to be able to speak to all three of them. We wish them safety. I'm James Reynolds. You've been listening to The Documentary from the BBC World Service.